Gang sexy. All right, let's take a crack at Prussia's glory, the battles of Frederick the Great from 1757 to 1760, and we're going to be playing the last part of the day in the Battle of Torgau. All right, so this is a game design. This is Robert Balanowski. This is GMT Games in 2002. It's a quadra game, and from what I understand, there's this one. And then there's Prussia's Glory 2, which we're using the scenario or the series rules, which are the Prussia's Glory 2 rules. But apparently there's one I think called Austria's Glory, which I have not found yet anyhow. All right, so I guess this is Age of Reason stuff. I could be wrong, but I don't know much about that. This is another game that's pretty much outside of my realm. All right, so I have played one turn trying to get familiar with the rules. You got to love these game books that give you a sample of play. Now, I did not use that, but I did, as I was playing the first turn in this, I was looking at the example of play from the full version of this game where your units come on the map, like where the Prussians come on the map down here. So, like I said, I need to do a little reading about this battle, but here's the premise right now for this. So, apparently, the Austrians were headed out of town. And here's Torgau over here, and up in the corner, you barely see the edge of it up top. There's the Elbe River, which comes down here. And Daum, or whatever his name is, for the Austrians, Daum, they had already sent their baggage trains across the Elbe River. So I figured they were headed out in that direction. And apparently the Prussians hit them from two sides. So you have demoralization objectives in this game, which I won't cover that. I'll explain that at the end of the game. But you also have some victory points for any of the wings for the Austrians that cannot have a free path to the city of Torgau at the end of the game. So right now that, okay, so that tells me, okay, well, don't let the Austrians get trapped. Now, sometimes I like to play these games and not read a lot of the depth, because, most of these I seem to play like with Napoleonic and stuff like that. You're trying to crush and destroy or demoralize the enemy, the opposing army, and not necessarily a whole lot of locational objectives in the game, which in reality right now for this battle itself, the only one is to not get blocked off from Torgau. All right, so this game has, much like all games, it seems like every game you play, there's one interesting mechanic. Well, this one's got a really, really good mechanic. When you're doing combat in here, you might have stacks, all right? And these stacks might have, we'll take this one right here, okay? So this stack, the top unit is artillery, okay? Second piece is artillery. Now, any stack, you can have up to 12 steps of infantry or cavalry, and then you can have 8 steps of artillery also. Or artillery by itself, you can have 12 steps of artillery, right? Now, you have two things in this game called engagement and support. And artillery does not impact engage or support. They are in the hex. They bombard is pretty much what they do. They're not part of any kind of close assault stuff, at least not that I've read yet. And they're not affected unless the results table says that if they're in a hex that gets attacked or does the attacking, they are not affected unless the CRT tells you that they are affected, okay? Like it may say if there's artillery in the hex, the artillery loses a step. So these markers, they have a small number on them in a bracket. That one has 4. Inside those brackets, they're below the cannon wheel. That's the number of steps they have. The numbers across the top are their ranges in hexes. So 8 is at point blank, 4 is at 2 hexes, and 1 is at 3 hexes. All right, you'll have some units that have 0 at 3 hexes, meaning they can't shoot that far. And then you have a cohesion rating in the top right, and then you have a movement factor in the bottom right. Okay. Now in the stack, if these guys get attacked, the infantry and cavalry are the ones that get accounted for in a shock attack or close combat or whatever you want to assault. Now, you'll see the top unit there, he has 3 steps, okay? And then the bottom unit has 3 steps. So, the first 4 steps in a stack are the ones that take the results, take the losses on the combat results table. So how this works, and it's really cool, because I thought to myself, over here, these cannons sitting right here, when the Prussians started the first turn, blasted this group that was in here, and they took 5-step loss. I rolled a massive number on a 6-sided dice with a bunch of pluses, because artillery at point blank range gets a +2 die roll modifier right off the bat. And those guys had to take 5 losses. Well, let's talk about how that works. So this unit here, he has 4 steps, all right? So what happens is you start taking the losses, and like I say, it's the first 4 steps are considered the engaged steps in the battle. So if you have a 4-stack unit, a 4-step unit on top of a 4-step unit on top of another 4-step unit, this top unit is the one that is considered engaged. Nothing happens to the other units. So you have to start the 5-step loss process, if that's what your result is on this guy. So you would flip him over, and now he is a 3-step unit. All right, well, you've only taken 1 of your 5-step losses. Now his cohesion or morale is that little number there is a 6. So the rule says is that you start your step losses and you start reducing the unit. So he's been reduced 1. Then he has a sub counter in here somewhere. I think he's right here. Let me see. Yeah, a lot of these units that are 4 steps have sub counters. So he's taken 1 step loss. Now you're reducing the second one, and there's a second one, and he's still got a morale of 6. Okay, so that's 2 step losses. You still got 3 more to fill out. So you flip this, and he's taken 3 step losses. Now his morale is a 4. The combat results table has this thing that once they hit, their morale goes less than, or is 5 or less, regardless of the number of step losses that need to be taken, they become disordered and they retreat. So now he's not taking any more step losses in that fight. So you've accounted for 3 step losses with that guy, and he has retreated away from the battle. He might rout. You might have a result on the table that says rout. So you have taken care of all the step losses for that unit, right, or for that engagement right here. Now, what happens when that unit, who was the only one that's engaged, when he retreats, what happens to the units below him? They now become the engaged units. Might be a little tough to grab, but when you're playing this, it's not that tough. So now the results start getting applied to units below. So there were 2 units stacked in here. They're all back here now. They were right here in the face of this artillery. So that first guy took 3 step losses and ran away. And then the guy below him, he had to chew up the other 2. Well, sorry, take it back. The retreat accounts for 1. So the guy below him, he had to take that other step loss of the 5 that they had to take. All right. And then I had another artillery shot later on that chased the other one out. So that's kind of interesting because, like I say, the first time I saw that, I rolled that, oh, they take 5 step losses. Like, oh my God. 1 cannon fire, 1 defensive fire did that, destroyed an entire unit, a massive sized unit like that right away. And then when I read the rules on how to apply those losses, I was like, oh, well, that's a nice little mechanic. All right, another little mechanic you have in this game is when your phase starts, i.e. we'll use this hex right here. He had 2 infantry units in here with him. They were battalion units, they were smaller, but they were in the zone of control of the enemy. So they immediately, now you can move out, but they immediately get this thing called an engaged marker that goes on top, all right? And if they do combat, the second time, if they're still in there, they'll end up getting a -2 die roll modifier. So you have this mechanic. So it's either you get them out if you can, you get them out of there if you can. If not, they become engaged and they stay right there. Doesn't mean they have to attack, but if they do, they're eventually going to suffer some die roll modifiers, all right? And I guess this is how you hold units in place. So now, units underneath that aren't considered engaged, you can pull them out with no problem. And this is the way I'm understanding the rules. Nice big counters, all right? Nice easy numbers to read, color-coded. So 2002, I guess that's not that old that you would say this was ingenious for that time period, because I know we have games back in the 90s that they color-coded stuff too. All right, so that's the units. You have infantry, you have cavalry, you have artillery, and then you have what's called wings. So each of your leaders is a wing leader. But the wings are composed of a group. So a group that has infantry in it is an infantry group. They might also have cannons with them. A group that is all cavalry will be a cavalry group. All right? And so you've got wings and then groups. It's kind of like saying you have brigades and then regiments in a way. So wings and then groups. So at the start of each turn, or of each side's phasing, you roll on with these chits over here to see whether they're going to be a normal activation or degraded. And there's a range number that you roll on these chits. Okay. So if you roll a 1 to 4 for, if you roll a 1 to 4 for infantry groups, and this applies to all infantry groups, all right, on that side, if you roll a 1 through a 3, they're going to get a full normal activation, which means their movement allowances are complete and they can move their full distance. If you get a degraded, which on this one's a 4 to 6 for any of the Austrian infantry, their movement's going to be half, okay? Now, let's say you go through you roll for your groups, and let's say they're all degraded. Well, your commander, the army commander, if he is stacked with a leader from one of the wings, he can roll, and if he rolls successfully on a 1 to 4, let that focus in, then he can apply normal activation to the leader below which he is stacked with, which means that leader's group. So like I know all of the Austrians were degraded when they had to do their first roll, but Don was sitting on top of Bakal, or whatever his name is, so he rolled successfully. Bakal got a full normal activation with all his cavalry. So that's pretty cool. All right. This is all fog of war stuff to me. So you always look for those fog of war mechanics so you can say, okay, good. This is just not going to be me constantly counteracting everything I do. All right. Then you have the demoralization, which I notice a lot of Napoleonic games come with this stuff. So demoralization. This is basically how your victory conditions are established. So in this scenario, they all started at, let's see, the Austrians started at 21. No, they started at, was it 20? Anyhow, your active morale marker will start somewhere on the demoralization track, or the morale track. And then as you take eliminations or captures, what you do is wherever this morale, so let's say this morale marker started up here on turn 21. The first elimination or capture you got that is off the map, this unit gets put in here underneath that marker, okay? That's kind of a freebie. All right, then the next unit, you'll start working your way down. At the end of it, you'll do a phase adjustment where this morale marker might come down. So if the only thing that happened to the Austrians morale-wise was they lost 2 units, during the adjustment mark, this thing will come down here to the morale of 19. However, they get some pluses too. So for what they do to the opponent, certain events, their morale might increase. So you see how that works? So in other words, I think the Austrians started here on 20. So their morale, even though they lost 2, their morale actually went up 1. And then this stuff here slides up. So you can raise your morale, you can lower your morale. For the Prussians, the poor Prussians, eliminated unit and a captured unit, and they didn't get anything to plus their morale, so they came down 2. And it keeps doing that until you get an adjustment going the other way. All right? So that's how morale demoralization will work in this game. Turn record chart right there. Like I say, it's 5 turns this scenario is. It's the end of the Battle of Torgau, which to me made the most sense to play, especially when learning. Like I say, big counters. Use the Prussia Glory 2 rules. There's charts you can print off. I print off all the charts and put them on cardstock. There's 4 charts, 2 pages. So you can use those. A lot of die roll modifiers. This is all the die roll modifiers for combat, okay? And then you have a bombardment table right here, all right? You got a deployment card right there. Sequence of play right there. Activation stuff and what happens, things like that. Rally modifiers where you can rally your troops. There's a phase for that. So, and the matter of fact, the weird thing is your phases for rallying is between bombardments. You have an offensive bombardment, then you have defensive bombardment, then you have a rally, then you have an offensive bombardment. So, and that's all your artillery just firing all their guns and stuff. So, all right, so here we go. Prussia's Glory, the Battle of Torgau, the Dark Maelstrom. And we're playing the last 5 turns of a scenario, or we're playing a 5-turn scenario at the end of the Battle of Torgau. and the Prussians are going to try to break this up and cut these guys' retreat line off. All right, if you played this thing, let me know what you thought of it. I thought it was a good-looking game. McMurray sent it to me. He picked it up at a con he went to, and or a gameplay session he was doing somewhere. And it looked good to me, so I wanted to get out. I reclipped everything. Somebody used toenail clippers to clip this one, which is cool. At least they did it. But I'm reclipping it as I go. All right, let's get this thing played. Let y'all know what's going on. Talk to you soon.